All right, today I'm going to show you how I made this sand table. I'm calling it a sand table effect with interactivity that could be used with multi-touch or with mouse input or both to make interactive particles. All right, this was something I thought about this last week and I tested it out and I think it works pretty well. So I'm going to show you how I do this. So first with the container, um, because we're going to be doing some interactive input, I need this to be inside of a container. So it has to be in one of these panel types, but I'm going to pick a container. I'm going to go into that. I'm going to start making some of my variables. I'm going to make my particle width. I'm going to just do that at 500. Particle height. Then I'm going to do my output width. And then an output height. Put that on a null. I'm going to call it variables. I'm going to right click and say view, and I'm going to shrink it down, put it up here where it'll be out of the way. And I might add some things in the middle here. I might not. We'll see. That's why I wanted to put it in a null in case I add some math in between. Okay, so I'm going to start out first by making my particle system. I'm going to use GLSL top, and for anybody that's scared of GLSL, this is not a scary GLSL thing. This is just a way for me to get an easy UV map. The way I do that is I go down to this vec4 color line, and inside the vec4, I type in vuv.st and then comma 0, comma. And that gives me a perfect UV map for whatever size this top is. And if you're scared of, or if you don't think you're going to remember this, this is actually the exact same thing that's typed right here. So you can just copy and paste that in and then put a 0 and a 1. What this is saying is that the vuv.st is taking the essentially u and v, or the x and y, or the s and t values, and just putting it out as the pixel value for each pixel, depending on which pixel it is. Probably wasn't the best explanation, but long story short, this takes care of the red and green value for each pixel. The blue value is going to be 0. The alpha value is going to be 1. So if I hit A and then N to show my separated normalized outputs, you can see I have my nice ramp from on red going left to right, my ramp green going top to bottom, my blue is 0, and my alpha is 1. So that's what I'm going to use for now. And to go back to this, I'm going to close these down and use this as my initial position. Oh, the thing I forgot to do, I'm going to set my input size, or my resolution, using my constants, so that if I change it in the future, I can have that linked. Okay, so now these are going to be for my particle position. So let's actually just go ahead and jump right to rendering our instances from this. So I'm going to make a null, call it position, and then I'm going to make my instancing network for the particles. And I'm going to do that by doing a add sop. I'm going to say add points, and then I'm going to convert that. I'm going to bring it into a geo. I'm going to turn on my instancing, bring in my position to the translate op, R and G for X and Y. And I'm also going to add my point sprite material. Let's also not forget to convert this to a particles per point. There we go. Okay, we've got a nice grid. So now that you'll see this grid, it's actually a little too nice, and we'll fix that in a second. So before I get to that though, let's finish our render setup here. Let's add a camera. And I'm actually going to leave this one kind of floating a bit. I'm not going to make it orthographic because this is going to be my actual render out camera that I'm going to use to move around and get whatever angle I want on these particles. And then I'm going to add my render. I'm going to go to the resolution and do my output width and my output height. Okay, so let's use our camera to zoom in on this guy. Actually, let's hit view here, shrink it down. And our first problem here, so because we have this regular grid, we're getting this moire pattern, and I don't want that. I want it to feel like a nice sort of point cloud of of points. So I'm going to add a little bit of noise into this by adding a noise top after my GLSL. And then I'm going to change this noise top, make sure it's input plus noise. So the noise that I want to add, I want it to start at 0, and I only want it to be, I only want it to change up and down a very slight amount. And the way I'm going to do this automatically is I'm going to say, I'm going to do 1 divided by me dot width. So, and you can see that actually didn't do everything I wanted to. I saw this moire pattern, and that's because I need more precision in my numbers. I'm going to change it to a 32-bit RG. Okay. So you notice what that did too, if I go back to my normalized amounts, actually I'm getting rid completely of that blue and alpha output on this, and just using those two channels. Just it makes it a little more efficient for what we're doing. Okay, so now I'm getting some noise, but this is regular noise. I want this to be random noise. And there we go. That looks like a nice rough texture points. There's no moire patterns happening. It looks good and random, but my points are still pretty close to where their initial UV values were. Okay, so what are we going to do next? So now I'm going to decide. So I've got my red and green are changing my XY position of or setting my XY position of my points. But I'm going to use the blue value to put in the Z depth of this. So to illustrate this, I'm going to bring in a ramp. Let's get this out of the way. I'm going to put my white point in the middle of my ramp, blacks on the sides, and then I'm going to put a circular pattern. And then, let's see, for the period, let's do like 1/4. No, that's too much, but let's do like 1/3. I want it to be a good whole number, so that way when I go and I animate my face, adds time, about seconds. It's a little fast, it's divided by 2. And then, yeah, let's stick with that. So that looks pretty good. We're just animating a nice wave out. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to insert that that ramp in as my blue value. So let's do our reorder, bring this as a input number 2, and then input, or my blue output I want to come from input 2, and I'm going to use the red value because I'm going to make this a 32-bit mono. So let nothing get in my way. Okay, 32-bit mono. And then we're not seeing it yet. Like you see, we don't see any blue yet, and that's because we can see this is still RG because it's based on what my input is. So I'm going to change this now to be, let's go ahead and do 32-bit RGBA. Okay, so now I've got my red, green, and blue. All I need to do now is go into my instancing and add that Z depth from my blue value. Okay. And it's working, but it's obviously blowing it out way further than I want it to. So I'm going to insert after my ramp a math and use this to adjust down how far that height's going to go. So you'll see here. I'm getting these hard points, so I'm going to smooth that out by going in my ramp and selecting ease in, ease out. That gives me nice soft edges on my ramp. Okay, great. So we're getting closer. I'm gonna even move my camera up so we're like in the camera. All right, now one of the things I want to be able to do is if I'm making this for an interactive installation of some kind, and maybe there's a touch screen or even just a single mouse, I want the user to be able to come up to this and click and drag around and sort of draw on these sand particles. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use render picking, but I'm not going to use render picking for the individual pixel points. I'm going to use render picking with a placeholder piece of geometry, and that's going to be as simple as the 1x1 rectangle. So I'm going to go to my stops, add a rectangle. It's going to be 1x1, but I'm going to move it so that the middle of it is in 0.5, 0.5. So the same middle point as where my points are going to be. I'm going to bring that into a geo. And then I'm going to also add a new render now. So this is actually going to be it's going to be invisible geometry to the renderer essentially, but I do need to render a version of it out. So I'm going to add a new render. And then I need to go to my render settings here. So this render 2 is going to be for my touch surface, and it needs to use the same camera, but I only want it to look at geometry 2. And then for my for my render 1, I only want that to look at my geo 1. Okay. So this render 1 is showing my particles, render 2 is showing my touch surface. And so render 2 is what I'm going to be sending out, and sending out to the monitor that's going to be touched. So where do we go from here? So now I'm going to go process my multi-touch information. So and my render picking. So those two work together nicely. So I bring in a multi-touch in, and I bring in a render picker or render pick, and I connect those. And for my multi-touch in, I don't have a multi-touch connected to this computer. Macs are not very good at handling multi-touch, but if I go in here and click include mouse, you'll now see, it's bringing in information about where my mouse is. And then for the render pick, the parameters I need to think about here or worry about here are what render top is going to be, what render top do I need to be picking from? So I'm going to use my render 2 for that, so that it gives me the points on the surface that I'm touching. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to, right now I'm viewing my render 1 directly, but what I want to start looking at is instead I want to be looking at the container that I'm in, because that's what I'm going to attach this multi-touch panel or multi-touch to. In fact, let's go ahead and do that right now. In multi-touch, I'm going to go in the panel and I'm going to say me.parent. And then I'm going to change that to evaluate mode. And so now it's going to be looking at my parent container that I'm in right now. And this button up here will give me a view of my parent. So this is my container that I'm in right now. And you'll see as I click around, I can see let's see, it'll make more sense if I go all the way. So you can see I'm clicking and the UV is going all the way up and down from related to this, where this canvas is, or this container is. Okay, but I got a couple problems. I need to have it show my particles, and I need to have it the right size. So I'll close it out for now, go up a level, and in my container, I'm going to bring in my output width, my output height. And then for the look, I'm going to say, go inside of this, and the out one is the top I want it to look for the view of it. Okay, so now when I go back in and click this, now I'm getting my panel. And this will now also register my touches when I touch this window. Okay, so right now, if I click, okay, I am already getting my information on path. So yeah, no, I am getting it. So this is right. So I'm getting touch points on this geometry. That's my Geo2 geometry that I'm getting the touch on. And if I include this texture UV, now when I click it, it's giving me the UV point that I'm clicking on that square, no matter where my camera is. If that doesn't make sense yet, then it's going to make sense in a little bit when we start mapping that information to what's going on with the particles. Okay, so now we've got two dots here. I'm going to get rid of this attached dot for now, or at least collapse it. And I'm going to merge these two pieces, or these two dots together, because there's a piece of data from each of those that we're going to use to fuel our touch input. So I do my merge. I'm going to change that to append columns. And then I'm going to convert this to a dat. And I'm going to say I want a channel per column. And the first row is names. So now I got my names, and the first column is values. Okay, so I'm mostly doing this fully with everything right now, because if you did do multi-touch, this will work with multi-touch. Right now, if you notice, this first column of points is all that's really changing, because that's my mouse input coming from that first row. Let's select out just the data we want here, just for better readability, but I'm going to use the select, and I'm going to also select out the map U and the map V. Okay, so we got our select, which is telling me when my mouse is pressed, and the U and the V to tell me what UV points I'm touching. All right. So now for this, I'm gonna make my own little instancing network, and I'm gonna do that inside of a base. I'm gonna start by adding a null, right clicking, and say collapse selected, and this is gonna be my my touch data. Okay, so I'm gonna go into that. I can delete this null for now. And then I'm going to use this for a new instancing of circles. So add a circle sop, put that into a geometry, add a camera. This one's just going to be orthographic. So we go orthographic from bottom left, and I'm going to do ortho width of 1 because we're going to just be doing a 1 by 1 square to represent our UV values from 0 to 1. I'm going to shrink this circle down quite a bit. Let's do 0.03. And let's add a constant material. And then let's turn on our instancing in the geo. So we turn instancing on. Actually, let's add our null back just for, it seems right that we should do that. Bring on our null, and then, okay, for active, this is whether the circle renders not. We're going to do the select, and for the X position, we're going to map U. For the Y position, we'll do map V. Okay, so now when I click on my panel, I'm seeing my little circle moving around. Okay, what am I going to do with that? So I'm going to render that. And the width and height of this doesn't quite matter. I do want it to be square and have okay resolution, but let's just make it a 720 square for now. And okay, so this is where I'm clicking on that piece of texture. Let's see, something doesn't quite, oh no, that this seems okay. Okay, let's keep going with it. So I'm going to use this data to kind of push down these particles wherever I'm pressing. So I'm going to, and right now, if I hook it up, it'll just be, a big circle that's pushing down all throughout here. But so that it feels like it's sort of a material or it has a spring to it, I'm gonna put this into a feedback loop. So let's go on to feedback. Let's blur it so we get a nice sort of expansion of it. And then I'm also going to add a math in here. This will make more sense in a second. And then I'm going to add an add. Okay, the add's going to go back into my feedback. And then when I draw, okay, getting drawing happening and it's blurring out. And then I'm going to use my multiply to bring it down, bring down my opacity, my values down ever so slightly as we keep going around. Let's turn our blur values up, and we'll keep tweaking on these values a bunch as we go. Let's make this 32-bit so we get a lot nicer, cleaner ramping data between all the values. This is also going to be important. The reason we want it to be 32-bit is so that we can go past 1 and keep pressing down. The longer we press, the further it's going to press down. Okay, I keep talking about how it's going to press down, but I haven't shown it yet. So let's do that. So let's have this go back out of our base here. The reason we do this in here is because we don't want, all these are set up to kind of automatically pull in every geometry and every light and every camera. And so instead of having to go in and rename all those in here, putting it inside its own base simplifies that. Okay, so let's go back out of our base, our touch data, and then let's go ahead and I'm going to make a new null here and call it blue. And then I want to take my drawing data and I'm going to add it to my ramp data. And we're going to have the same problem of it being way too big of a value. Oh, sorry, not ramp data. We're going to do, let's do a composite in case we want to add any more later on. And then say add. And now I probably should make this the same size just for sanity's sake. I'm gonna get 720 by 720 just so we're adding together two sizes. Okay. So now when we draw, okay, we're getting, it's blowing me up here. Um, and it's not fading out fast enough. So, but at least we're connected. So now we can tweak our values. You can see it slowly coming back down. So let's add a level to this, and let's bring down our opacity. I think this is going to go. Okay, we're pushing things way too far. And also, if you notice, I'm not pushing down, I'm actually pulling them out. So one thing I'm going to do here at the very ends, there's obviously there's a lot of different ways we can do this, but I'm going to go in the math and I'm just going to multiply this by -1 to make all my values negative. So now I'm pushing down. If I click around, you can see that pushing down instead of pulling up. And then actually, instead of multiplying by -1, let's make the values a lot less here. Let's do 0.1. So we're only doing like a tenth of what that was. Okay, and my mapping is still not quite right here. Let's see if we can figure out what that is. Okay, so if I go to my multi-touch in, doing relative positions, let's zoom out a little bit. Okay. Render to. Ah, okay, so yeah, my render 2, I have a different, I didn't make this the same size. So I need to make this render size also my output width and height. That's what I forgot. Okay, yeah, that's much better. So now to see where I'm drawing from that point is where it pushes down these particles. So now even when I move the camera in, even if I put the camera at weird angles, where I'm touching the surface of it is where it presses it down. And so we can keep just tweaking these values in different ways. So if I go in here, let's even drop the math at the end here down to 0.05, so it's half that value. Okay, now we're getting a little bit better of a reaction. Another thing I could do here, instead of having just this hard circle that gets drawn, you can see like the initial circle is maybe a little too harsh and make some hard edges. Let's make this a ramp texture. So I'm going to do circular. I'm going to take the middle of it, make that white, take the outside of it, and drop the alpha all the way down, and then say hold. I'm going to bring up the middle core of it a little more so I have kind of a wider core. And I'm also going to bring down where the alpha kind of starts, just so I don't have any kind of weird edges happening. And I'm going to drag that onto my concept material. And now when I draw, I'm going to get, as you maybe see on here, get a little more, um, a more faded off sort of edge. I'm going to add blending on here as well. See if that makes much of a difference. So yeah, it's got a little bit smoother of an edge. I can also go and, one of the things I can go in and tweak based on what effect I want is the size of what this touch should be. You can go really big or, really small. And yeah, this ramp you can change out for all sorts of different things. Like maybe I want to change this to a vertical wave and draw draw on top of that, or even going radial. Um, play around with that, do a bunch of different things. Um, and then of course, because we used a UV map for our particles, we can map out a similar color map just with the noise or I mean, really anything that's the same size, but I'm going to add that by adding noise, turning off monochrome. I'm going to say just the noise is what I want. And then I'm going to blow up my period really high. So let's do 50 and let's animate it ever so slightly. I'm going to make this change really slow. And let's put this in a null. We'll call it color. And then in my particle geo, so my geo1, I can go into my instance 2 tab, bring my color in. Oops, did the wrong one. RGMB. Starting to fade away, so I'm going to go into my point spray and I'm going to increase the scales of my points so they fill out a little more. Definitely going to go back to the ramp being circular. Okay, so I think that's probably enough. But yeah, just I like this idea of being able to to interact with 3D geometry that's not just perfectly straight on or orthographic with the camera and still get a mapped out interactive with what that is. So definitely show me if you use this in any of your projects, or if you have any other ideas of how we might be able to use this. Thanks.